Dr. Elizabeth Hoefer is leading Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractor and chair of the California Chiropractic Association House of Delegates. She's the founder of Well-Connected Chiropractic in Mission Viejo and a Blair Society instructor focused on gentle precision care for neurological health and concussion recovery. So tell me a little bit about your journey. What did you study in college, and was this your plan all along?
Not the plan. When I was in high school, I was really into musical theater and singing, and I thought that I would be a Broadway star. And then what happened? Well, I got pregnant right after I graduated from high school, and I had a baby in July, the following summer. So the plan to go to New York was off the table. And all of a sudden, I was a single mom and I was working 3 part-time jobs and working at
Oh,
the
well.
mall, trying to figure everything out. And I went to college at Palmer College of Chiropractic. I did my gen eds at the community college and then like online school, basically through the University of Iowa and different colleges that I could do any of my gen eds. But ultimately, I started going to college because I had gotten a job at Palmer College of Chiropractic, and it turns out chiropractic is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
It's an interesting story. There's a lot to say about chiropractic care, and for the most part, it feels really good. But the problem that I personally have with chiropractic care is that it's more reactionary than preemptive. And it's almost like you're a residual client because every week you've got to come back and readjust. I mean, you talk about why chasing symptoms fails patients. So, what's your opinion on that, and what do you propose as the solution?
I love that you have that opinion because it's such a common thing that people talk about. And the beauty in the work that I do is it's the exact opposite of what you have just described. My work is preemptive. My work is solution oriented. And every time I perform an upper cervical correction with the intent to never have to do it again, I'm effectively putting myself out of business because people get better and less is more. So it's a phenomenal conversation to have because chiropractic is about the health of the nervous system. And that's the most preventative thing that you can be. Now, I do agree that in many worlds, chiropractic is nothing more than a natural aspirin. And I know that sounds sacrilegious to say, but the truth is people go and get adjusted 3, 5, 6 times a week, and they have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And that is the antithesis of what I do. I create neurological and structural stability so that people do not need to be in my office all the time. And then when they have that stability, they actually get better and they heal and they live a life without having to be at the chiropractor all the time.
Explain to me the pathway here of why this approach works and why this isn't implemented more broadly. Is this the kind of like the cancer of the industry where they rather keep you somewhat sick so you're a returning client? And that's not a stab at the chiropractic system. That's really, more broadly speaking, how healthcare works in the country. But I wonder why good solutions are often overlooked.
That's a really good question too, because I've for the last 17 years fought to educate people on the power of upper cervical chiropractic, which is what I do. I think it's not widely known because it's a harder thing to do. It's more neurologically based. It's takes a lot more study and training. It's more specific in the art and the application of the adjustment. It's not just a rogue manipulation and making noise. It's super specific and the mechanism and how we go about this is by doing really detailed imaging. I specifically use a cone beam CT, and I'm able to take a 3D image of the neck and literally engineer the correction to the person, their anatomy specifically. And so it's detailed to their degree, their facet joint, their body. And I have hundreds of upper cervical chiropractor friends that are busier than they can even imagine. Like I had to take a week off and I had to tell 3 of my friends, like, if I'm gone, you guys need to cover for me because right now I don't have an associate in the practice. And so we're all busy beyond belief. And I'm not quite sure why it's not more well known other than it's just harder to achieve. But the truth is, when patients experience this type of care compared to the more traditional manipulation in chiropractic, they rarely turn back and do something different because they do get those results. They aren't wasting their money. When COVID happened, I had just opened my own business as I think I was in business 10 months personally. I was an associate before that. And I was nervous. I was like, wow, like I just opened my business and now this thing happened and the whole world's changed. Well, my business exploded in the summer of 2020 because people went to me because they had solution. They had finally an answer to the thing that they had been searching for so long. So it was a really cool thing to experience as a doctor, as a practitioner, to see that people were willing to invest their money and their time into something that actually got great results instead of just that traditional like story of, man, I go to the chiropractor and once I go, I have to go forever. Now, my rebuttal to that comment is just like diet and exercise. When you eat well and when you move well, you benefit. Traditional chiropractic is no different. You have benefit from getting adjusted, but what we want to achieve is neurological and structural stability, and that's different.
Yeah. There's a saying out there that cheaper is sometimes more expensive. If you're trying to get a proper fix, getting really high-end work for a short period of time makes so much more sense than going in for $29.99 to get a few cracks that just give you relief of a few hours. And there are chiropractors who obviously make it a little broader where they spend an hour on you, but there are services that will literally go in for like 45 seconds to a minute and a half, and they will do a couple of cracks and then they'll kick you out the door on your way. And it's like a subscription service. Even here in Aventura, there is one. I tried it and I'm like, yeah, this is a complete waste of time. And honestly, just doing good exercise for me pays off so much more than doing those sort of adjustments. So tell me a little bit more about how you solve the problem. I'm genuinely curious. And does this work? Like, how do you manage herniated discs, scoliosis? I'm genuinely curious because stuff like a herniated discs, you can build muscles around the problem, but really getting a long-term solution is something that I often hear chiropractic professionals say, but from my experience towards the
Mm-hmm.
people I've asked, this
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case.
Right.
People say when they go to get care, they never get properly taken care of.
Sure. And unfortunately, just like in any profession, there's bad, right? And so, you know, a herniated disc is a complicated situation, but when you give a proper environment to anything, epigenetically, things are going to improve.
Mm,
So, from the upper cervical standpoint, this is the most neurologically rich area of our entire neurological system, right? The brainstem and where our brain and head come together. It's called the cranial cervical junction. And the atlas surrounds the brainstem. You've got the C2 that it kind of pivots around, and then you have the stack of the vertebra below C3 down to C7. When we can get those vertebra aligned and we can use physics and leverage to make that cervical curve as healthy as possible, it changes the environment in which those discs get to live. Now, we have a curve in our neck on purpose. Now, some people don't have a curve in their neck on purpose. It's totally their design. So, what we want to do is get them to their optimal, not a perfect curve or lack of curve, as it were. And when the discs are translating gravity effectively, they don't bulge out. So, personally, in my years of practice, I have seen discs heal. I have seen bulged discs repair. And I know that seems crazy because 99% of the people don't have that experience, but I have a lived experience of actually achieving that with patients. So, it
mm.
just depends on who you're seeing. So, I would highly recommend you give upper cervical a try so that you can have an educated opinion on the difference because I agree, getting a 29.99 adjustment 3 times a week and having last an hour or not as long as it takes you to get to your car isn't a good investment for sure of your time, your money, your
I would
resource,
argue
all
it
that.
to the opposite is that sometimes when you're taking action towards a problem, it prevents you from recalibrating and taking the proper actions.
Mm,
So when you feel like you've kind of created this like temporary solution, it really distracts you from taking a proper adjusted step towards a direction that can actually help you long term.
I agree
Because the
with you on
stuff
that.
that helped for just a day is really not that valuable.
No,
Now,
agreed.
yeah, and speaking of like the flashy aspect of things, we watch on Instagram where they've got these like microphones and they make these like giant cracks and
It's so
these super loud
cringy.
noises, and then people cry and they go, "I've been healed." To some extent, it's interesting to see people have an immediate sense of relief, but I think looking beyond that, there's probably not much more there. From if I had to make a guess, now you use advanced 3D imaging and thermographic analysis to
Uh-huh.
replace this process of physical and aggressive kind of adjustments to the back.
Sure.
Explain to me how this is different and why this solves what I've just described.
Well, it's different because we're using objective measure that can be repeated and it's your anatomy that we're looking at. So when we make a correction based on the anatomy of your body, you're not going to get the same correction as the person down the street. It's
Yeah.
genuinely designed for your anatomy. And the thermographic scan is measuring the autonomic nervous system, and it is a repeatable test that we can show. One of the things that I talk about a lot in my practice is pattern analysis, and we can pattern a leg check, a leg length and deficiency. We can pattern the scan, the thermographic scan that we were just referring to. We can pattern your posture. And so what your unique patterns show up as is the thing that we document and observe. And so when we
Mm,
see that there is a a misdirection of your pattern, then we start to ask more questions like what is causing that? And the neat thing about especially the Blair work that I get to do is that let's say I want to adjust you from the right side of your neck and you hold that adjustment for a couple of weeks, but it just isn't perfect. We can reverse engineer it and adjust it from the left and harvest the anatomy in a different way. And then all of a sudden,
mm.
magically, you hold for years. So
That's
it's
incredible to
really
hear.
neat in the application on the art of the chiropractic correction and being a doctor, not just being a technician.
Right, but you still do adjustments physically to some
Yeah,
extent.
yeah,
Right. It's not aggressive and it's not in the traditional sense where you're just looking at if their legs are aligned and that stuff. It's more about looking at well, I'm sure you do that as well, but what I'm saying
sure.
is you're getting additional data from 3D imaging and thermographic analysis.
That's right. And,
Right.
a lot of other things too, posture analysis and, you know, symptoms, people, that whole thing where you say you watch them and they get this, my God, my life has changed. I actually had a very similar story, but it wasn't from this crazy cracky manipulation. It was literally from an adjustment that if an untrained person looked at it, you'd be like, what misalignment was there? It was just this insidious little misalignment that caused wreckage to my nervous system, and it got corrected.
Mm,
And instantly, like literally, the colors in the room were brighter, the sounds were clear. And that's how I knew, wow, it's been 19 years that I had to spend the rest of my life studying this and
wow.
providing that level of care because I had suffered for 27 years before that.
Hmm. That's so interesting. So it sounds like your uniqueness factor in terms of what you do is really in the data. And I wonder if there's potentially a model where people don't need to actually come in the office. They can go to a facility, get a scan, and then you can give them a plan of action on their own. Is that a weird question? Or because, should what you do that's exceptional really not be done, not really be the magic that's physically at the building where you're working? I wonder if there's a model here where you can scale this up.
Well, I don't know if that's a reality, because I mean, yes, could a technician or a robot do a scan? You sit in a chair and they scan your neck, and I'm sure that that could be achieved. But the nuance of understanding and reading the physiology and doing the correction or reading how all of it comes together, that's where the doctor part comes in that can never
Hmm.
really truly be replaced. However, I will tell you that you just said something that kind of piqued my interest, and it's true. It's the in between. It's getting the correction and then holding it is where the magic happens. It's not necessarily that first adjustment. Now, did I have a profound experience after that immediate correction? Sure, but the holding it is where the healing occurred, and that's
Right.
where that epigenetic change can happen. And so, yes, is there a way where we could just line people up and measure their posture and you say, oh no, your hip is up 2 today, you're not out? I'm not sure if that'll ever be a thing because there's more to it than just these factors individually. It's literally like a mosaic where it comes together. But I do think that more data and ability to gain data would be something that'd be very helpful for our profession because I think it would lean to being able to continue to prove what we do.
Having you
No,
as a
yeah.
doctor, being able to look at it would be obviously pivotal. Just so I make sure I conveyed that correctly, was that y if it's those 3D imaging and thermographic analysis that are so fundamental, would you be able to do a diagnosis remotely, for example? Would that make sense?
So that's something that we talk about all the time because I also train chiropractors on how to do these adjustments. You can see a misalignment on an x-ray, but that doesn't mean that it's neurologically significant. So you could have a bone that has shifted a millimeter, and that's a pretty huge shift inside of a little tiny body, right? But that necessarily doesn't mean that that's a neurologically significant misalignment. And that's where, like, being able to observe the patient in real time, hands on,
Mm,
is going to be the difference. So there are things that I can do to check and ask, hey, does this physiology respond? And so I do a little stress and pressure, or I move the
Right.
direction and the
I see.
misalignment. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So it gives you like a set of action, a focus points, and
sure.
then you start going isolating which one is
Yep.
the one that's the primary focus, right?
That's
Okay, I
exactly
see.
right. So that's why making all that noise and cracking your neck one side on this side and turn over and do that side, like that, sure, that can make a change temporarily, but maybe it's not, like you said, the best change. And if you chase after that kind of quick little endorphin rush for 15 years, you never create stability, then you're definitely not going to get anywhere.
Interesting. So now let me ask you this. What do you see the future of the industry looking like? And tell me more about how you manage this balance between your day-to-day and being in the board of various faculties. So how do you navigate all that on like you can only have so much time during one day,
Everybody has the same amount of time. So when people say they don't have time, it's just they're making a different choice, right? So I manage it because I have an amazing team that really does most of the work. I get to just be in the room with the patients and they handle everything else. So I have a really large staff that like manages everything in my practice. Even today I'm gone and there's services happening that aren't chiropractic, but my business is still running while I'm
right?
here with my family.
Right. So you
Where do I
really
see the
focus on your unique expertise. So anything that you can patternize and delegate, you do, and that allows you to be a little more high functioning because you're
That's
constantly
right.
focusing on what's hard to replace about you. Okay,
That's exactly
interesting.
right. And so, um, what do I see the profession going? I feel like the cream is going to rise to the top, and the people that are going to continue to succeed are going to be the ones that get the results because people aren't going to continue to pay for something that doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. So, in fact, you made the argument earlier. It's almost against your own interests to solve the problem. I hate that way of thinking in the medical industry, but you're so
Right.
right that that is a pervasive way of thinking, whether people are conscious of it or not. But ultimately, I think that it's the exact opposite. I mean, I think when you give people real value, you're going to get nothing but recommendations, and people would much rather come to you regardless of price if you're actually solving a problem where they've gone to 50 other people who couldn't solve it.
That's
And
exactly right.
something about back pain is that it's subtle, but it just takes up your whole body and it takes up your whole brain, and it invites a certain sense of agony that for someone to be able to get rid of that properly, I think is priceless. I really do. So yeah, it's interesting how you see the future generation. The future of the industry is very simple to you. It's people doing good work are gonna rise to the top, and the people doing bad work are gonna have to innovate.
That's right. Or
Yeah.
find something else to do, and I would prefer that because you can innovate and be really good at business, but be a very terrible chiropractor, and that's where all these, like you said, these little, franchises pop up. Like, that's a great thing. You can sell the idea of health, but if you can't deliver it, what good is it?
Mm, well, awesome. So how can people get in touch with you, Elizabeth?
You can find me at wellconnectedchiro.com, on all the social media channels at Well-Connected Chiro. I have a podcast also called the Well-Connected Podcast,
Mm,
and I'd love to connect. I'd love to answer more questions and get people totally pumped about upper cervical chiropractic.
sounds great. Thank you so much for your time, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.